Welcome again to another segment of Adirondack Natives Historic Preservation. This is the Earl again, and just wanted to continue to add to our history of Barker Store, Edinburgh, New York, our Native Indian connection, the Underground Railroad connection, and that's what we're going to focus on today is the Underground Railroad connection to Edinburgh and the surrounding area of Edinburgh. I wanted to make that connection because that is a part of history that is not told about Edinburgh, that it was a stop on the Underground Railroad, and I want to show that it was, and show significant historical proof today. So our first reference is going to be, if you go over to Google and type in archives.org, and you're going to look for the Underground Railroad right there. You're going to type in the Underground Railroad, and this source is going to be from the official National Park Handbook. And let me get out of there real quick. It's U.S. Department of the Interior, Washington, D.C. Make sure we give them proper documentation. And let's see if there's... I don't see a copyright, but I'm sure it's copywritten by the U.S. Department of the Interior. I don't see a year, but any references like this usually are. And then we're just going to scroll over, and you're going to see a whole bunch of, once you find this document, you're going to see a whole bunch of little icons pop up here, and about halfway or so, we're going to start seeing a lot of references for New York, and this one here mentions Garrett Smith, so we're going to go over here, and this page talks about Garrett Smith. It talks about his involvement with the Underground Railroad and abolitionism in New York State, and talks about the Anti-Slavery Society in the 1840s through 1850s. And Garrett Smith was synonymous to some degree with John Brown and other members of the Anti-Slavery Society during that time period. Let's see what our next reference brings up here today. And this page talks about the Underground Railroad, the North Star, Douglas's anniversary newspaper called the North Star. I'm not sure if that has any. I'm pretty sure that it has some connections, and it does. It has connections to Albany, New York, which we can see. It has connections to David Ruggles, and that you see a picture of John Brown there, an older picture of John Brown, and let's move along here real quick, and then we have another example of slaves exiting the South, going into New York. On the next page there, scroll out there real quick. Actually, I'm going to scroll in from the South into Canada, through New York. So this is a well documented piece of history and documents the Underground Railroad, the route that the slaves would have taken, and the people that would have helped them, Harriet Tubman, women like that, women and men of that stature. And I want to get out of there. That's you can research at your leisure further, and it has several different references, but they're the few that I wanted to point out. And then we want to go back to Google and just type in New York Times. This is a New York Times example that I want to use. It's written by Nicole M. Christian. It's February 19, 2002. That's the online version, the electronic version. And her name is spelled NicoleMChristion, February 19th, 2002. Excuse me. This talks in length about Lehman Epps, the Civil War, the Buffalo, and then Garrett Smith. Once again, we have another example of Garrett Smith that he gave away 120,000 acres of land beginning in 1846. That URL, I want to show you that URL in case you can't find it in the New York Times. And that website, I'll just scroll right over there. It'll take you some time to probably find that. So if I give you that URL, you'll be able to obtain that quicker. Talks about Lake Placid. Talks about Syracuse University, the Adirondacks. This is a great find for any historian. Once again, North Alba, which is linked to John Brown, Garrett Smith. You can look that up. I want to make that. We already did that there a few minutes ago. So this is a great reference for us to show that the Adirondacks, not specifically Edinburgh, but the Adirondacks, and Edinburgh is a part of the Adirondacks. So that is an indirect reference, but if it's a reference, anyways. So you can read that at your leisure. Once again, just go over to the New York Times. I'm sure if you type in the title of her edition here, North Alba Journal, recalling Timbuktu, Timbucktoo, a slice of black history, and you type in her name, Nicole M. Christian, and February 19, 2002, you'll find that. And it's once again, and let's see what the copyright is at for that. And it's way down the bottom, 2018 copyright Times, the New York Times Company. Copyright 2018, the New York Times Company. So I want to give them proper documentation for our copyright. Then we're going to head over to Syracuse University. Go back to Google. You can type in library.syr.edu, and I'll show that URL to you right now. And that way you can, if you can't find it by just going to the Syracuse University, you can find it by typing in that URL. This is copywritten by Syracuse University and Syracuse University Libraries. It's under the Garrett Smith papers. It just gives a brief history about Garrett Smith. This is associated with John Brown. Once again, we have another reference there. Looking for reference to any references to Edinburgh or that surrounding area, Peterborough, Central New York, about halfway down on that site, we see a name of Peter Smith, and he dies in 1837. He held some 556,000 acres of land in 43 counties of New York State. He ended up dividing that among his son Peter, a daughter, and then his other son Garrett. So that's where Garrett got his land plots, was from Peter Smith. So that's a good connection there. Talks about the Oswego Railroad. Talks about the Oswego Canal. Garrett Smith once again. This is another terrific find for any historian, and it gives us links to the Temperance Society of New York, which would take further research, which we will not endeavor today, but this is just some of the things that I wanted to show my onlookers and fans that, once again, history does not happen in a vacuum. It's Utica in 1835, New York Anti-Slavery Society. Garrett Smith spoke at conventions regarding the Anti-Slavery Society. Garrett Smith once again in the Adirondacks, somewhere between 1840 and 1853. Smith was elected to Congress, represented the 22nd New York District of Oswego and Madison counties. Mentions John Brown, associated to Kansas in 1857. So this doesn't have a direct reference, I don't see, to Edinburgh and the surrounding county, but it definitely is an indirect reference. So you can go through here and you can look at that. It's quite lengthy. So we're going to get out of there, and I want to make sure I got my copyright. I can't see a copyright, but since it's Syracuse University Libraries, I'm assuming that it's copywritten underneath Syracuse University and Syracuse University Library Special Collections Research Center. And that's all for that one. Once again, I want to make sure that I've documented everything that I could document. Don't want to get in trouble with any persons or people there for not documenting anything. And we're going to get out of there. And then you go over to Google again and just type in the Underground Railroad stops and then dash Edinburgh, New York, and there's Barker's store. This is we already have photos on my Google page. I have some of the photos that I added on my YouTube page, but this is further proof that Barker's store, and we see it right there, was most certainly, we can say with almost 100% of surety. Wouldn't say 100%, but by Google saying that it was part of the Underground Railroad stop, Edinburgh, New York, this definitely is further proof that Edinburgh was a part of the stops along the way for black men and women seeking shelter in the Northeast and eventually into Canada. I wanted to show you some of these old buildings. This one here. Let's do a different link. These are some of the buildings that I come across. And you really can't see that too well. But this is very similar to the Edinburgh store that I'll show you. Here's another photo. Very similar design. I'm not a builder or a contractor, but by looking at the Edinburgh store and its design and architecture, it's very similar. And I wanted to show you that. Let's zoom in there so you can get a better picture, because I'm going to show you the photos that I obtained of Barker's store, and then we can make that significance. We make that connection. This once again is Barker's store. The sign that sits outside of the store. There's Barker's store. There's a photo of Barker's store. Further significance or further proof that Barker's store was a stop in the Underground Railroad. any other. I want to point out this picture too. This picture here is very unique, and this here is the John Brown Farm. This is in Google Images, and it's copywritten by Google Images and Google itself. John Brown Farm is a historic site, and this is very similar. Very similar to the photos that I'm going to show you. The photos I'm going to show you of Barker Store in Edinburgh. So we're going to get out of there. This is a written example of the Underground Railroad in New York, and it's in ilovenewyork.com, and you're just going to type in Underground Railroad in New York. Let's go down and get our copyright, and it's copywritten 2018, New York Department of Economic Development. You can see it right there. 2018, New York Department of Economic Development, that copyright. And this just talks further about Garrett Smith. It talks further about John Brown. It talks further about John Brown's site. It talks about the North Star once again. Harriet Tubman, Frederick Douglass, Mount Zion Church. Just Peterborough Anti-Slavery Society once again. Further proof of New York and its significance in the Underground Railroad involvement of history. This is a important period in time as far as the Underground Railroad. Next, I'm going to show you some more photos in Google Images. Go over to Google Images, and we're just going to type in Underground Railroad Stops, Edinburgh, New York, once again, or just type in Underground Railroad Stops, New York. And you're going to see these photos come up. Once again, anything in Google is copywritten by Google Images and Google itself. And I want to stroll down here about halfway and click on some of these pictures. These three pictures are of great interest to me because they represent and look very similar to that Barker store in Edinburgh. There's one. That's in Cass County. Not sure where Cass County is. Won't do any great research there. But you can see the style of that building, how kind of run down it looks. And I'm going to point that out as far as the Edinburgh store. You can see the doors. There's a couple doors in that Edinburgh store. You can see these passageways or doors. You can see the door here. I'm going to show you a door in that Edinburgh store. It looks very, very similar to. I'm going to scroll in here so I can show you. Right, these doors here. These look very similar to these ones in Edinburgh. And we're going to get out of there. These are definite Underground Railroad stops. This one here, we're going to view the image. Google image, another one. And we're going to blow this one up a little bit so you can see it. Once again, copywritten Google Images, Google. And this one here. And very similar kind of a style to that last one I showed you. You see the door. You see the bottom doors, very similar to the one in Edinburgh. Once again, Google Images in Google, copyright Google Images, Google. This one here is located in Ontario, New York, Underground Railroad site, historic site. This is very similar once again to the Edinburgh store. Its design, the fact that it's built out of some wood. You're going to see that in the Edinburgh example that I'm going to show you here momentarily. So these are just examples that I want to use to prove the building type, not in in that surrounding area. But these are building types built in the same time period, obviously. I want to get over here. I want to show you these images. These are the images that I took, and I'm going to scroll in there. And this first one I'm going to show you is exactly what I was talking about moments ago about these doors. We can see the bottom door there. We can see these upper windows. We can see what looks like a door over here. I'm going to scroll down. Very similar design, the old wooden design, 1800s, beginning of 1800s. There's another door. This is the back. This is a back door. This is more toward the middle of that store of Edinburgh. Let me get out of there. So you can see this right here, right there. Yep, that right there. Very similar to the ones that I just showed you. And there's the Edinburgh store. And the wooden structure, very old. And these doors that I'm talking about are right here on this side. As you're looking at the building, they're on the left side of that building, which most certainly was used as escape routes. Held slaves. We don't know for certain if they did, but there's some significant proof here that I'm providing today, and I want to make that connection. So I want to get out of there, and let's see if I have any other photos. No, we want to X out of that. This next example, go back over to Google Images, Photos, and this one is of New York. And this is the Underground Railroad, some of the counties, that the Saratoga, Warren County, and Washington County. It shows points north from New York City. So Saratoga and Warren County. Saratoga, we know that the Sacandaga Lake is in Saratoga County, and we know that Edinburgh is very close by to Sacandaga River. So we can make that connection there. It wouldn't have been a far travel by horse and buggy, or by carriage, or by covered wagon to go from any points in Saratoga or Warren County to Edinburgh. You're only talking about maybe 20 miles. It could have been done in a few hours during that time period. Maybe a little bit longer, but within 4 hours you would have gotten at any point in Saratoga or Warren County to Edinburgh. So I'm going to get out of there. There's that photo again. And we're going to go over, and I want to show you this example. These you're going to go into Google. You're going to stay right in Google. We're going to stay right in Google. So Google is an amazing tool. You're just going to type in list of historic homes, places for the Underground Railroad, New York State, and list is going to come up. You're going to see this list, and I'm going to show you right there. You're going to see that. You're going to see Farmington Quaker Friends Meeting Home in Farmington. You're going to see that. You're going to see George and Rebecca Barnes House, Syracuse. Garrett Smith National Historic Landmark, Peterborough. Harriet Tubman Home, Auburn. Howard Lynn Stone Store Museum, Aurora. These are all in New York. Hunt House, Waterloo. John Brown Farm, Lake Placid. John W. Jones Museum, Elmira. These are all located in New York. And John Brown's and the Elmira one are very close to Edinburgh. And we've already talked about John Brown. We've already talked about how close that is in proximity. But yeah, it's quite the travel. But these are all located in New York State. So there's a great example there. And we're going to get out of there. And My next example is going to be this is the electronic edition, and it's from Sarah Hopkins Bradford, and it's from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Copyright 2000, University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. Once again, copyright 2000, University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. And Sarah Bradford was an author, obviously, and she wrote extensively about not only Harriet Tubman, but the Underground Railroad, and the URL for that. I'll give you that right now, so that way I don't have to read it off to you. There's that. And this talks in length about Harriet Tubman, her journeys. You can read it. You can read that at your leisure. She is a primary source for anything regarding the Underground Railroad. That's why I'm sharing that today. And once again, I just want to read off the title here. This is the first edition, and it's Academic Affairs Library, University of North Carolina. Title page: Scenes in the Life of Harriet Tubman. Written by Sarah H. Bradford, Auburn, New York. W.J. Moses, printer. 1869. And call number, and apparently this is located at Perkins Library, Duke University, and we see that call number is 326.92 Thomas 885B, Perkins Library, Duke University. I wanted to make that connection, give our props to Duke University, and that is that example. That is not a first-hand account of Harriet Tubman's life, because it's not written by Harriet Tubman, but Bradford followed her life extensively. She wrote about her a few times in her life, and so that's that. Make sure we got all of our documentation. And once again, it's copywritten. Sorry about the copyright. It's 2004 by the University Library, University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. And that's right there on the bottom. So there's my next example, which is probably my most proving and most what I would say poignant and probably greatest example that I'm going to show you today is from a book entitled Eastern New York, All Outdoors Atlas and Field Guide, written by let me get over there. Sorry about that. It's Eastern New York, All Outdoors Atlas Field Guide, written by Sportsman's Collection, and it was published by Sportsman's Collection August 27th, 2016. And we're gonna get over here, and we're gonna go 79, page 79 through 80, and we're gonna see. So we're back over here to that Eastern Google Books, and that is, let's see if we can find a copyright. I apologize about that, and let's see if we can find a copyright there. Maps, Eastern book. Continuing in our example here that I spoke of, page 79 and 80, and that's and we're going to be looking at covered bridges, and I want to zoom up here. Talks about covered bridges in New York State, the Empire State. And that's just one example of one covered bridge. We're going to scroll down, and really, come on. So yeah, we're back at that example, Eastern New York, all outdoors Atlas Field Guide, and you're just going to go to the search where you can search and just type in Copeland Covered Bridge, and it's come up with one example, and it's on page 79 and 80. That Copeland Covered Bridge is not only a part of the old military road, which we talked about in the last couple sessions, but it also mentions that it was a part of the Underground Railroad route during the time period in question. So that is a perfect reference to what we have been talking about, to proving the Underground Railroad's significance.